The increase in suicide rates amongst women is staggering. Since 2019, the majority of cases are now female. On today's show, we want to talk about mental health because it is so important, especially coming out of these past 2 COVID years we've been through. My name is Deborah Henry.
And my name is Zoraya Vadillo. Welcome to Women Talk. So today we're going to be speaking about mental health, and we have 2 fantastic guests joining us today to speak about this topic. So thank you very much, Dr. Cassandra Aasmundsen-fry, 10 years clinical psychologist, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much, Shereen. You are a addict survivor and now a recovery coach. So what an amazing, fantastic journey you must have been on. And thank you so much for being here with us to discuss it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so important that we have this conversation. I mean, and it's great that it's becoming more and more mainstream, but I want to jump into a quick statistic. The World Health Organization says that cases of anxiety and depression have swelled by over 25% globally since COVID-19. And in Malaysia, this is a crazy statistic. I mean, I was very alarmed reading this. 83.5% of the 1,427 suicide cases from 2019 to 2021, so 2 years, were females.
That's incredible.
I mean,
so many.
Yeah, and any number is bad, but what's going on? This sudden rise in female suicide rates?
Especially when around the world it's actually more typically that men commit suicide more. Why are those numbers so high here?
Much more common that men try to commit suicide at lower rates than women, but they usually use much more lethal means.
Okay.
So typically what we see is that men are suiciding more often, whereas women might attempt it but not be successful.
All right.
So the 83%, I mean, that's staggering. I've also seen that same statistic.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that, over 50% are children, 15 to 18 years old.
Yes.
Right? So I think that really shows.
That was even more shocking.
Yes.
More shocking.
So young.
So young.
What's happening to people?
I think it really comes down to the lack of social support, the lack of attention. People aren't going to medical doctors, to appointments. There's increasing rates of conflict in relationships and domestic abuse, and just conflict with family members. And we know that those are the kind of the instigators to pushing someone who's already depressed over.
Yeah, so talking about triggers, right? I mean, and I think, Ika, you have a very personal story, but very often it can be very small triggers, sometimes very big things in someone's life that happen that just send them down a very dark path or a difficult path. What have you seen, especially now in the past few years?
Just rewinding a bit, the causes of mental health is actually genetics. You know, I think it's a percentage of 40–60% genetics, which means I could have either gotten it from my parents or my grandparents, my aunt, and the other 40–60% is an external factor. So that would be the triggers. So it can be any form of physical, emotional, sexual, or spiritual abuse or neglect. And there's also trauma, maybe bullying, or any of those sort,
What do you see more often with the people that you work with, for example?
There's a combination of quite a lot. Sexual abuse, bullying in school, dysfunctional family patterns.
And they're young, most of the people you work with?
Wide range, can be from 20 all the way to 60s. I have a few clients in their 60s.
And ultimately it's feeling that you have someone or something that you can turn to that's going to essentially help. But that's not always available, or we don't always know how to access that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we found one of the key protective factors is really having someone you can rely on, someone you can call. And in fact, part of suicide prevention for us is really identifying support, right? Like different organizations that can help, peer support is proven to be really helpful, but also who's your friends and family who you can call that can teach you coping skills, right? Like your people will also teach too.
Yes, I mean, just being able to communicate certain things that you're feeling and to be in a space where you feel that you can be vulnerable to talk about it.
Yes,
having that bouncing board of feelings actually is so important. And I feel that in today's society also, one of the big problems of mental health is the fact that we don't have spaces of comfort where we just discuss things among each other anymore.
Well, kind of COVID robbed us of that in a big degree.
It did. It did. I think with COVID, the reason so many of our youth are struggling is because they weren't in school or they were in online school. So often it's a school counselor who picks up on it or a teacher.
Yes.
And then your family might not be the most supportive.
Right.
And you're at home with that.
And everyone, to be fair, adult, child, everyone's been dealing with various forms of stresses. So sometimes we've not been able to look outside us and to see who's suffering or who needs help. We're so consumed with what's happening in our own lives.
It is also very important to know that COVID does not cause mental health issues. Yeah, okay, no doubt when we're in lockdown, a lot of people probably feel down and depressed, but once everything is back to normal, they can just be okay again. But unless someone, you know, like I said earlier, if you have the genetics with the external environment, yes, COVID is an external environment, it is a trigger, but it does not cause someone to have mental health issues.
That's important to understand, actually, because people often think that that's the thing that's giving it to you, but no. Yeah.
But it's also the fact that we use, you know, like everything, mental health now becomes another buzzword, right? So everyone's mental health, which is important. But I think that kind of then you've kind of put everyone in the same category when it's so important, as you say, to differentiate, because once things normalize a little bit more, you still have a lot of people that are really still suffering.
You take the gravity away from the people who really need
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we're going to take a quick break now. When we come back, we're going to actually hear Ika's personal sharing. We'll see you soon.
Especially when I was training during the Olympics, was very difficult for me. There was a lot of highs and lows, and of course the pandemic. So I actually sought, and throughout my career, I've actually sought professional help. I saw a psychologist, and also it's very important to me to communicate with my friends and family, tell them how I was feeling. And also I used to journal a lot as well to be able to express my emotions and to deal with basically being an athlete, and even now when I've retired, to help cope.
So we've been talking about mental health and how it's progressed in Malaysia. I do think that typically there are a lot of stigmas and taboos attached to mental health, but we do see the conversation becoming a lot more mainstream and people are talking more about it, which is a great thing. I don't always think people are quite equipped with the right tools, though, to be able to actually handle the conversations very well. But Ika, we would really be very honored if you could share with us a little bit about your personal story, because of what you went through, what triggered that, and also what your experience was like,
and as a recovery coach.
And how you really worked your way out of it, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my story. Being in active addiction and unmanaged mental health is a very dark and lonely place to be in. I was in my addiction for 20 over years, and I have to make it clear that I grew up from a good family background. It wasn't a broken home. I had great parents, good education, and then at the age of 11, my father passed away. And then in secondary school, I was no longer in the best class. That really affected my self-esteem. And as I go on, there was, I guess there was a form of emotional neglect. I wasn't feeling the love. I wasn't getting the love that I was, hoping for. And there was probably rejection, like, love rejection and sexual abuse as well. Yeah, so the only way I knew how to fill that void was to turn to substances. It started off with the light substance like marijuana, and then it escalated to ecstasy. And in the last 10 years, I was on methamphetamine every single day for 10 years non-stop.
Wow.
I mean, what you went through is not a small thing. I mean, just what you're saying.
Yeah.
What was it that got you out of it?
I reached so many bottoms. I have to add also there was like at least 3 suicide attempts. And the first suicide attempt was, I was 12 years old. And now looking back, I don't know what could have been so bad that a 12-year-old wanted to commit suicide. And you can tell from the young age there was something that was just not right sitting with me.
It speaks to the genetic part of this,
the genetic part, and plus with the external environment, right, which probably the passing of my father.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Dr. Cassandra, I actually wanted to ask a little bit about treatments, because we know of therapy, we know drugs as well, but what other ways are there of treating these kind of things?
Sure. So the most common and beneficial treatment, it is therapy and medication, but it has to be specialized with someone who's highly trained. And usually treatment is focused on safety planning and thorough risk assessment. We know that having a consistent relationship with a therapist, being checked up on, is key. The problem we face here is that there is the hospital, and only government hospitals can help with suicide attempts. And there is no kind of in-between, like a program yet that really can hold someone, watch them, be with them, give them consistent support. But that is actually a big step down that's very important.
Ika, if I can ask, what was it like for you? Did you attempt suicide first and then got help, or was it the other way around?
Oh, attempted first. Yeah, I didn't ask for help. But the thing is, we must know that Malaysia has not decriminalized suicide yet, not even addiction. And we're close. There's been talk about that. So meaning if you try to commit suicide, you can actually go to jail for it. So when I tried sharing it with my loved ones, instead of helping me, their response was, hey, you know you can go to jail for that. So when I swallowed a whole bunch of pills, the first thought was not going to the clinic to see if there's any poisoning in my body. My first thought is, oh no, I have to keep this a secret because I might go to jail.
They've agreed to decriminalize suicide, but it's still not there, and I think worst of all is the mentality that I'm going to get in trouble.
I mean, if it's criminalized, has that ever changed the statistics of how many people try and attempt?
I'm sure it's much more underreported, and that is what I've heard. It's underreported, and it means that usually many people attempt, but much less complete. And that's not the case.
And I think the human connection part here is so important. I mean, and this comes down to when we talk about avenues of help, right? It is human connection, it is support, like we've said. And what I think so many of us as individuals in our own daily lives, you know, we're constantly in contact with people. Well, not during COVID, but more now, and how we can really also be those eyes and ears on the ground for people that need help. So we're gonna take a quick break, and we come back. We want to talk about compassion, kindness, and human connection, what that really means.
What we can do for one another as a society.
So for anyone who is under public scrutiny or any kind of social pressure, I would look at finding a balance between mental health, physical health, and spiritual health. For me, this formula seems to work, ensuring that I get some kind of attention and support when it comes to mental health. That comes in seeking professional help or talking to people I trust. That's important, someone you trust, so you can really share everything. And when it comes to physical health, making sure I sweat it out, work out for a bit, because I know if I go 3 days without working out, you know, it really bubbles up inside. And also, of course, spiritual health. Whatever works for you. If you are someone of the faith, then, you know, ensuring that you increase your practices and speaking to your one. And if you are not someone of spiritual faith, then finding a way to find that balance within. I find the 3 triangle for me works really well.
As a speaker, I communicate. So what I do is that I communicate with my friends, and some of them are close buddies of mine. We speak, we talk, we communicate. So this is the way that I handle if there's any stress in the day's work, something like that. So the best way for me is to flush it out of the system, and I adapt.
Welcome back to the program, speaking about mental health. And we wanted to talk a little bit about this statistic of 15 to 18-year-olds. I mean, this is a very young age group. What is the biggest obstacle to actually being able to help these younger minors and children?
Yeah, I think it comes down to that generationally, mental health is a lot more accepted, talked about, but when it comes to 15 to 18-year-olds, they need parental consent to get help. It's quite cultural that it's not, mental health isn't spoken about, or emotions. So I think it's really important that the parents out there, that they really try to embrace where their children are at. If your child is struggling, sleeping too much, eating too much or too little, Having suicidal thoughts is something that can be treated.
Is it just a lack of conversation among family groups nowadays that we actually, as a family unit, we spend so much time in work, in school, on our gadgets, even when we're around each other? Is that what leads to the problem?
A huge part of it, right?
There is a huge disconnection.
There's a huge disconnection. A lot of families and parents just don't talk to each other about these issues. They're busy. Things are tense because of COVID.
Yes.
But just opening the door a little bit. And I think many kids are just scared to talk about these things too.
Yeah.
The other thing that we were speaking about was the price point, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's why I wanted to ask you, Ika, what are you doing now for others? I mean, I think sometimes the people that go through it, you know it more than anyone else, the experience. And how are you offering services to people out there? But also the challenges that people are facing accessing health, mental health services.
It's not cheap to go for therapy and to pay for, drugs. It's not just once, it's like constantly.
And you have to sometimes go like, do I really need this? How much do I need? Is it worth the, $400 I need to pay?
Exactly.
And insurance doesn't cover it typically yet, so.
Yeah, that's another thing in Malaysia. Yeah, it is not cheap, but this is what I always share with the family. Like, if your loved one has cancer, will you spend money on chemo? Will you sell the house to send him for treatment? And we should treat addiction and mental health the same way, because it is a fatal disease. It's just like cancer, it's just like diabetes, it's just like heart disease. It's exactly the same. It is fatal.
It isn't, no.
Yeah, but that mindset is still not there. They can go out drinking and spend 2,000 ringgit a night drinking, but they're not willing to pay that 2,000 ringgit for their treatment that could possibly save their lives.
So what does access look like for kids? So if you're a teenager versus an adult versus someone older, who do you call? Where do you go to? Oh,
there's a lot of places that you can go. Like in Malaysia, we do have inpatient treatment and outpatient treatment. Inpatient meaning they stay at the treatment facility. Outpatient, they can still go to school and work and so on. And going back to you were asking about the price, there are different range of prices. So there's high-end rehab that used to cost like $15,000 a month, but now it's a lot lower, and then to a mid-range and to some that caters to the lower socioeconomic. And there are also free services as well all around.
There are also, the government is also
the government.
I was going to say, despite the stigmas that still exist in society, our government is doing the right thing. Yay, we're very excited about that. They actually allocated, I believe, 70 million in the budget for healthcare this year. And I know a lot of grants are being given out, especially focusing on mental health. So it is a priority. The government recognizes it, which is fantastic.
So Ika, what are some of the triggers that we should look out for in people to let us know that there might be a problem?
Okay, maybe there are many things that you can look out for. Maybe if you see changes in your loved one's behavior, or maybe they start going out and engage in unhealthy activities, or the opposite would be that they start to isolate and not communicate well. And like Doctor said earlier, the eating
changes in eating. Absolutely. I would add to that too that that kind of erratic behavior often can be seen as an impulsive suicide attempt, but often planned ones actually look like someone being quite calm, notes to loved ones, taking care of financial matters, things like that as well. So that's something to watch out for and take very seriously.
I mean, that's why it ranges between so many different things that could be the trigger.
Exactly, and that's when you see after these cases happen, people go, but I didn't see a sign, or there was nothing. And other cases, you saw many signs. And so I think the important thing to know is that it is really, I think I can't stress enough human connection. COVID has stolen so much of that from us, and really now is the time, to be there for each other, to keep your eyes open, and to be able to realize that it is very much human connection that is going to help us get over a lot of the stresses and struggles individuals are facing in their lives.
I mean, we as human beings, we are designed to be around others, and we need that love, we need that compassion, we need that friendship and family bond. So with the people that you love around you, cultivate that and keep those strong.
Exactly. I think as Dr. Cassandra said, keep the door open, and and even if it's just a little bit for now, and then inches and inches and inches, but take little steps forward to reconnect with each other.
It makes a difference.
Huge difference. Thank you so
and
much.
with that,
thank you so much for joining us on the show. And thank you to our lovely guests for being here and for sharing your story, Ika. It takes a lot of courage, so we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you very soon.
Stay safe. We'll see you soon.
Put the finger down if you have trouble saying no when asked for help. Put the finger down when you have trouble asking for help. Put the finger down if you find yourself constantly worried about other people's problems. Put the finger down if you keep quiet to avoid arguments. Put the finger down if you remain loyal even if another person or situation is harmful to you.